Hello, welcome to the first real episode of The Other Side Show. We're incredibly excited about this episode. We had such a good time filming the interview. It's our first real show, like we said, so the audio quality is a little not quite what we would personally like it to be, but we really like the content and we think you're going to really enjoy it, so keep an eye out for us to just make improvements, and we really think you're going to like this. Any suggestions, comments, harassment, whatever, send it to anothersideshow@gmail.com, and we've got some other social networking links up that will pop into the video or down in the description.
So today we'll be interviewing Richard Hartnell. He's a personal friend of both of ours. He's a really, really incredible contact juggler. For those of you who don't know what contact juggling is, he'll explain it a little bit later on in the video. But he is, like we said, a professional contact juggler. He does performances, he's an instructor, he's been around, taught at a whole bunch of different festivals and all over the place. He's busked his way all across Europe and various other places. So we got to talk to him a little bit about that, and
Yeah, if you ever wondered how to make a living street performing, definitely have to watch this episode. If you've got any kind of neat act, definitely want to pay attention to this. We'll put up Richard's contact info somewhere in the video down here in the description, and if you want to book him for any of the many talents that he has that Pal just mentioned, hit Richard up. You will not be disappointed, and enjoy the episode. Richard Hartnell, who's a wonderful professional contact juggler. Richard, for people who don't know what contact juggling is, can you tell pretty briefly what contact juggling is? Show us some examples.
Contact juggling is kind of a misnomer since there's not really any normal juggling going on. It's a one-ball style of object manipulation, or it's usually done with one ball, and it uses a series of difficult-looking body rolls and a bunch of sort of magic-influenced isolation techniques to create the illusion of a ball that is immune to the effects of gravity.
Cool. So where does it come from? Is the one-ball manipulation like that, is that something that's a more recent development, or is that something that magicians have been using for a while?
It's a bit of both. Principles of contact juggling, like body rolls, have been around for thousands of years, in Egyptian hieroglyphs and that sort of stuff. However, recently in the early to mid-'80s, this juggler, Michael Motion, who used to pass clubs with Penn and Teller, put out a one-ball routine that really made a lot of waves and got him work on Jim Henson's Labyrinth, and that was sort of when contact juggling, as we know it now, sort of the love child of juggling and magic and mime, came about in its modern incarnation. And there was other contact jugglers around that time. Tony Duncan won a gold medal in the International Juggling Association competition with one ball. That broke contact juggling out a bit more among the more juggly scene. And now there are legions of contact jugglers around the world who all collaborate and conspire on YouTube.
All on YouTube?
Yeah, generally.
Not in real life?
When we can get together in real life, but generally, unless you're in one of about 10 or 15 major cities, there is one contact juggler in any town you visit. So yeah, a lot of collaboration on the internet.
If you're not in one of those major cities, Oakland's one of the best places that you can be.
It's true. Oakland, Vancouver, most of the UK is really contact juggling. So is South and Central America. Tokyo has a really good contact juggling community. A bunch of other places I'm sure I'm forgetting. Berlin.
What about East Coast of the U.S.?
Florida has a pretty humongous scene of contact jugglers. Gosh, where else? A lot of the New York toss juggling community knows how to contact juggle pretty proficiently. Tony Duncan still teaches at a circus school in Brattleboro, Vermont, making presumably many new generations of contact jugglers.
Nice.
Cool. Great. Yeah, you want to show us some tricks? So what's a trick that you've been working on recently that you're really into?
Contact juggling is about stalls, first and foremost, and a stall is just a place where you can place a ball on your body where it's not going to move. And in contact juggling, the point is to be really table-like, so that you can really just put the ball anywhere at first, and then later on you'll eventually start to move around in that stall, and then try and challenge yourself and get beyond your comfort zone, and then eventually it all becomes really really all put together. So one stall that I've been working on lately is a stall called the jackknife stall. It's on this position right here, and I'm just starting to do it more confidently. I just got beyond the phase of like putting it there and watching it fall off, and putting it there and watching it fall off. I don't practice this trick as hard as I should, but recent developments have emerged that have made me want to practice this stall a lot harder lately, and I feel like it's starting to come together a little bit. Not nearly where I want it, but that's the case with every stall, I think.
Cool. So one of the things that we were wondering about, so you've been making a living for a while now, right, as a busker, pretty much, which is code for street performer, essentially, right? So tell us a little bit about that and how you've done that. How long have you been doing that?
I've been performing on the street for maybe, I don't know, 5 years or so. Since I lived in my hometown, I would do farmers markets on the weekend for just some side money, like a bag of groceries maybe every week. If I was lucky, some produce vendor would throw me a bag of groceries or something. And then over time, I started traveling around and used it as a way to scare up money on the street while I was hitchhiking and traveling by Craigslist and that sort of thing. And that, that at least was a way of knowing that I wasn't going to go hungry. I guess later after that experience, during that experience, I came to Fisherman's Wharf in San Francisco. I was coming here sort of by thumb from the Pacific Northwest. And I had come here when I was 17, and I'd seen the whole street performing community and all of that, and I'd always kind of had that seed planted since I was a teenager that this was a place where people do that sort of thing. So I eventually came down and made a pretty good amount of money for the half hour that I was really out there. I think I ended up making, 30 or 40 bucks, in that half hour, and I kind of realized that maybe it's a little bit viable. And
you set up out on the wharf the first time?
Yeah, and I was
really came down to San Francisco?
Yeah, and I was really lucky to find a space. It's kind of a racket out there.
Right.
It's really, really hard to find a good spot out there. But I got my half hour in, and just kind of did it. I think they could tell. I think the band that I was set up next to could tell that I was just going to be there for a minute, traveling through and all that kind of stuff. But then I came back to the Northwest, and I went to perform at Oakland, which is a big busking festival in Seattle. And ended up making quite a bit of money over a few days that I was there, and I kind of realized maybe this is a viable option for at least a significant piece of my income.
Cool. Is that how you make majority of your money now?
I'd say it makes about half my money, roughly. At a good summer festival, I can pull in 4 figures in my hat in a weekend. Of course, the parallel to that is that I'm spending a lot of time in here at $0 a weekend. So while it sounds like I may be pulling like a 3-figure hourly, sometimes it's not always the case. And finding the hours is tricky. It's getting harder and harder all the time to find places to perform in public as they get bought up by private equity companies and turned into sort of privately managed zones where people will try to restrict your right to perform in public. However, my mainstays, Folklife, Oregon Country Fair, all of those festivals are still going strong and all that. So generally I tour around all summer trying to make as much in my hat as I can. And then in the cold season I get a lot of private gigs doing entertainment at private parties, walking around at big shows and doing close-up entertainment and that sort of thing. Almost like a close-up magician would do, just a little bit different.
Can you tell me more about Folklife? you said that's a busking festival specifically. So what's that structure like?
Folklife is, in my opinion, one of the best busking festivals. I had traveled around quite a bit and been bounced from many a farmer's market by a power tripping private security guard or agro farmer's market director. Basically somebody with a little bit of authority who, you know, was tired of not using it while they were standing around all day eating candy corn.
It's tough to find a place to have fun.
Yeah, totally. So you know, I got to Seattle and then I saw their, you know, I read all of their regulations and everything. And it's in the Seattle Center, which is a giant urban park right at the base of the Space Needle in Seattle. And the whole place is full of street performers. And I read the rules, you know, and it's all the usual stuff that street performers generally know, like, you know, don't over-amplify your music, and, you know, watch out for dangerous props, like if you're selling CDs, you need a business license, like, you know, nothing really that bad applied to me. So I went out there and I set up in a fairly innocuous place and, you know, built my first crowd, and you know, when I had done so, I saw some staff members standing at the back of the crowd wearing, like, you know, an official-looking pin or something, and I started checking myself quietly, like, okay, well, am I blocking an exit? Am I, you know, what rule am I breaking? Am I in trouble? And, you know, she just waited there until I, you know, I built my crowd, and I did my bit, and then I sent them all off, you know, and she came up after, you know, the quiet moment, and she said, hey, do you have one of these pins yet? And she hands me out like a little button, and I was like, oh, no, not yet. She goes, oh, okay, well, take this, keep it with you, and that'll get you into the hospitality suite where we're feeding and supplying coffee to all of our performers at the top of the hill.
Nice.
Have a good festival, you know, and that's kind of the attitude around there, you know. I mean, even if, you know, your act is bad, they'll still, like, you know, get you into, you know, like, support you and help you out, you know, and get you some, like, and they're selling beer at cost in there. There's, like, private bathrooms, like, super good treatment of their buskers up there.
That sounds awesome. Cool. We're gonna put up a link somewhere so you guys can check out Folklife.
Yeah,
right?
Folklife in Seattle.
Cool. Folklife in Seattle. That sounds awesome. So you said you mentioned building your first crowd, right? It's like, can you talk about that and, like, sort of what was it like? I guess, like sort of how did you figure out which things built crowds? And what did you, like, are there maybe moves that you thought would be really awesome and impressive that no one cared about, you know?
Yeah, there's a famous disconnect between tricks that are satisfying to do and tricks that get reactions from audiences.
Right, yeah, that's a common theme through, you know, tons of arts.
And on the street, there's no better place to examine that feedback, or there's really no better place to examine that feedback loop than on the street. You know, people come and in a normal environment, they're trying to ignore you. We're really sort of trained in our daily lives to ignore what's, like, special and you know, interesting going on around us. You know, it's like getting in the way of our, you know, whatever it is, of our distractions. So you're in this little, like, fight with people out on the street. You know, you're out there doing something and putting on a show, and they're trying really hard to ignore you and, like, practice their sort of blasé attitude. And you learn really quickly which tricks attract attention first. You know, really big tricks where you're moving around and you're making, like, a big shape or something. You know, really difficult-looking tricks, or really, like, good illusory tricks, you know, where people are gonna double take even if they catch it out of the corner of their eye, you know. And then once you build a crowd, you know, once one person is watching you, then other people will see them watching you and then start watching you, and then you can build it from there. So really, it's a lot like flirting, where you have to, like, you know, pretend that you're not paying attention to all these people who are in your peripheral vision, standing there close enough to let you know that they're there watching you, but far enough away that if you talk to them or engage them in any way, they're just going to walk off, you know, because they know that you're out there, you know, to try and make a living too, right? Kids help a lot because they don't care. They know that if they stand there, their parents will stand there, you know. So if you're interesting to kids, then that's a good way to build a crowd. And then otherwise, I think, yeah, just getting wrapped up in what you're doing. You know, it's like if you can really convince yourself that it doesn't matter whether anybody's like standing there to watch you or give you money, then they're more likely to stop. It's like some sort of, like, I don't know, like vibe you put out or something, where, like, if you're out there comfortable, then people are comfortable watching you. But if you're, like, really needy and, like, engaging everybody who walks up to you in, like, an attempt to try and get them involved, then, you know, you're not gonna succeed.
Cool. Yeah, one of the times that I've seen you busking was at Oakland's First Friday, and a guy on a bike with some massive speaker rack just rolled right through the crowd and out into the circle where you were spinning. And people were like kind of looking at him, and you just started dancing to whatever music he had, and everyone like cheered and clapped for you, you know. And I thought that was really cool. How that was, like kind of rude. This dude just rolling right into your spot, and then you totally took it and worked with it, and I felt like the crowd really liked it.
Yeah, weird stuff happens on the street. You get hecklers, you get like people who are like, you get oblivious people just walking through your show. Somebody comes, kicks over your hat. Dogs, I love dogs. Like I love them just like sit there and play with a dog, and like everybody thinks that's hilarious. The dog thinks it's hilarious, and all that.
Dogs getting even more attention.
Yeah, for sure. And then there's this whole rule in clowning that if it happens during the show, it's part of the show. And like it's way more effective to the kind of work you're trying to do as a street performer. Of like, everybody wake up, like world's magical. That's like one of the fundamental messages of street performance. You really accomplish that more by taking something crazy happening to you and like turning it into more of a show. Like, when does that not apply in life, right? Like, I dropped the fork and stabbed myself in the foot while I was cooking, Well, do we like freak out about it, or do we make a gag about it? Regardless of like what's happened has happened, so you may as well like have an attitude of, theater about it, I guess.
Do you have any favorite moments?
Favorite moments? Last folk life, I had a really great heckle off of a mean old lady. She was like this really sour old woman, and like came up and she just started ripping on me, like really heckling super hard, and like I didn't know whether she was serious or like seriously like just upset about the fact of like me, or she was just like looking for like opponents, to like face off with as this old like comedian or something. But we went back and forth like super hard. Because the thing is like, when you're out on the street, you get heckled all the time, and when somebody, when the eventually the 27th person walking by being like, oh, he's playing with his balls, like, and you just crack 4 better ball jokes, and it's like not a challenge anymore, right? So sometimes you get those, like, it's like that kind of heckler or little kids. They're the worst hecklers, hands down, because they're like they'll demand every impossible trick that's impossible. They're looking, they want the thing to fall apart, they want you to fail, they want to they're gonna test you to make sure you're really a wizard, and then like if you're good, then they walk away thinking like, oh yeah, I met a wizard today, and adults too. That's the thing, like, and the better you are, the more you can hold that together. So like it's that I guess I don't know, it's kind of a cop-out answer. Like the whole thing is like one giant moment where like you're going out there and you're creating a moment, and then people come into your moment, and then there's this like funny context of like there's somebody standing here and the ball's floating, like I don't think I'm hallucinating, what's going on, and then like suddenly you've cracked this like context of collective boredom,
Shaking it up.
Yeah, totally.
So I guess the alternative to that, what's any really bad experiences that didn't go so well?
Oh yeah, sometimes the hecklers win. I always bring a regular ball or like a plastic ball out for people to abuse and destroy, because they walk up and they're like, oh, that's a trick ball, can I play with it? And I tell them, well, you can't play with a nice fancy show ball, that's like a $30, $40 prop. If you drop it, it's wrecked. Like, you can hold it, but you can't juggle it. And sometimes people are dissatisfied by that, so I give them the plastic ball. And that's handy for 2 kinds of people. One are the kids who want to come and say, oh, I want to try this out. 2 are the hecklers who come up going, that's easy, and you hand them a ball and you say, go to town, buddy. And the contact juggling, if you don't know already, is one of the least accessible art forms as far as like being able to pick it up and just do it. People put it on their hand and it falls off, and they try and do a chest roll and it falls off, and then that's the end of your heckling. Sometimes they'll hand it up to the crowd, and the crowd will laugh at their incompetence, and then you look better, and then it's one of those things. But one time in Edinburgh, at Edinburgh Fringe, and I definitely learned my lesson with this guy. He was heckling, blah blah blah, and that's easy. I can do that. So I tossed him the ball, and he just kicked it down the street, like perfect punt, like way up in the air, and the whole crowd looks in the air, and it came down somehow magically in between the 2 ladies eating soup on the sidewalk cafe, half a block away. And unfortunately, there was no recovery. The audience was just horrified. The dude walked away, and they shrugged and then did some cooler tricks, and that was that. Heckler 1, Richard 0.
Nice. It's a beautiful moment.
Yeah.
Could have only been better if they hit the soup,
Yeah, the soup may be just right.
Cool. So, do you find that heckling, do you get that different, like, home base versus traveling? Or are there any, like, serious differences that you've noticed versus performing, say, around your hometown or wherever you're living, versus, say, while you're on the road and trying to make money traveling?
That's a good question. It really depends on the context of the event that you're in. You know, farmers markets everywhere are kind of the same, you know. Street fairs, you know, I mean, every event really has its own flavor. And sometimes there are places where you do better for some reason or some reason that you didn't expect. And sometimes there are places that you do way worse for reasons that you wouldn't expect. I didn't expect to do so poorly at San Francisco Pride, but over 3 years I got kicked out once. I spent the entire it was twice. And the first time I spent the entire time arguing with the police, and the second time I spent most of the time arguing with police and then didn't make any money anyway. You know, just young party kids don't want to tip. Conversely though, the counterexample of that is Oakland's First Friday, which is covered in rowdy young kids who like to tip. You know, generally like bigger crowds of people with disposable incomes, cash in their pockets, that sort of thing is really handy. That's why like street fairs and festivals where people are wandering around with their kids buying stuff all day. They have 10 ones in their pocket by the end of the day. You know, they don't mind giving you a few. Other places, it depends on what you're performing. You can make great money playing music at a train station, but you can make no money juggling at a train station because people can't stop to watch you. You know, so really, it's just about like a part of the skill you cultivate as a street artist is sort of an intuitive like sense of your surroundings and your collective context and whether or not it's going to be viable as a bill-paying day or more viable as just a practicing day or making somebody's day random without making anybody's day. You know, on just the right days you make everybody's day and you make much money.
Sounds good.
Yeah, it's great when it happens.
What about country to country?
Ooh, country to country. Europe, in general. Well, I guess I didn't really busk in mainland Europe, but I did some busking in the UK, and despite having an even harder time finding places to perform in the city, Euro coins, and also busking in Canada, dollar coins are really, really instrumental in making a bunch of money. If somebody drops you a handful of change in the States, you make 85 cents, and if somebody drops you a handful of change in Vancouver or in London, you can make $8.50, which is why I make a point to go to Edinburgh Fringe every year. Because they have, 1 and 2 pound coins, right? It's like if you get a note, that's, with the exchange rate, $8 you just made, right? And sometimes you do, sometimes you get them. Also, people in the States that kind of cultivated boredom is a lot more pronounced, I think, than overseas. Like here, you put down a hat and people sort of clear a circle, start walking around you. Whereas in the UK, you put down a hat and people start kind of stopping to watch before you're even started. Like, okay, well, you have a hat down. You gonna do some tricks or what? Come on. Then who knows? Maybe that was just that I was traveling around tourist destinations in the summertime. Maybe if I lived in London and had to busk, once a week, it wouldn't be as easy. Conversely, it's way more difficult to get a good place to perform in places with big street performing scenes like London than it is to get them in places like San Francisco. San Francisco is still very, very competitive, but I felt like when I was busking in the UK, or particularly in London and Edinburgh, it was definitely a lot more of me versus a lot of other hardened street performers, dudes who do backflips and really good jugglers and really good statues and mimes and character actors, as opposed to back here in Seattle or in San Francisco. I find that mostly the people I'm having to compete with for space are street people with a good gimmick or even a bad gimmick who are just really aggressive about the kind of space that they need to not do anything at all. Yeah, exactly. Which is unfortunate. That's why I think that a lot of artists have an obligation to go and street perform more frequently so that we can chase the hacks off the street. It's not to say that people, that we should take a means of survival away from folks, but if you have all day to practice, then why not practice?
Cool. So you mentioned kind of the versus other street performers thing. Is there kind of any problems that come up with sort of turf issues between other people that you've had to deal with?
Yeah, absolutely.
Ethics advice for people who are thinking about going out and doing street performing?
Yeah, I'd say the biggest example would be the Ferry Plaza Farmers Market in San Francisco. While buskers in the States do have First Amendment protections against being driven off of a public space, that doesn't mean that people won't come and try. And the Ferry Plaza Farmers Market is one of those examples. There was a guy in Seattle named Magic Mike who sued a bunch of private security for harassing him out of the Seattle Center under the rationale that it was private space because it's privately owned. However, the judge finally decided, and it's the same judge that presides over the Bay Area, decided that if the public would just walk in and walk around, then it's public space, right? If you're not going to go and tell other people that they can't, what was the line from the decision? There's no reason that a panhandler should be able to walk around square changing with impunity, while a magician is singled out and targeted for having the audacity to entertain people in a public park. And then he ended up winning like 5 figures in damages, I think, in a lawsuit. Unfortunately, generally what happens is they just send the cops after you and trust that you can't hire a lawyer out of your hat, which is usually the case. So at the Ferry Plaza Farmers Market, we used to have about 15 performers, maybe 15, 20 buskers, and maybe 10 to 20 places to perform. And they came by and they kicked us all off the plaza one summer unceremoniously under some made-up pretense. Basically, a guitarist showed up, and not that has to do with guitarists, but this one guitarist would go and follow people around and find big crowds of people, even if they were there for another event, and kind of try and make them a part of his show, just break the rules, basically, like the unwritten rules of how not to be a jerk and make everybody hate you and ruin everything for everybody else. And somehow, that's when we discovered that somebody gave a job managing their public gathering space to a lady who hates public art. And she made a bunch of really ugly statements about buskers and about busking in the news media, and then kicked us all off of the plaza where the farmers market happened. So now, there are about 15, 20 performers and about 5 or 10 spaces to perform, and that means that there are about 12 to 15 performers trying to wedge themselves into that spot because, by the time people are relying on a gimmick, like a really gimmicky street act, like a funny sign or a sick-looking animal, they're not interested in sharing space with you, and being driven off the street might be the end of their best livelihood ever, right? So now we're kind of all lined up there at the pack of hobos, and sometimes people do get really aggressive. You get out there at 7 in the morning to get a good space, and then one guy sits right there, and another guy sits right there, and no amount of arguing with them is going to get them to move out of your space. So you either move or you just write it off as a potential venue, which is what I did last year for the Ferry Plaza Farmers Market. Oh well.
Yeah. What's your favorite spot to perform in the Bay these days?
Ooh, I really like the Berkeley Farmers Market, except they have a furlough on their performers. You're only allowed to perform there 2.5 hours out of the market because they feel like it's unfair that people who sleep in and then show up at 12:30 and want a place to perform can't find a place to perform. I have more things I could say about that, but I think they'd probably be self-evident. But it's a great farmers market. The vibe there is really good. The people are fun. The other acts there are phenomenal. All the other people who come and perform at the Berkeley Farmers Market are really, really good. They're really friendly. What else is going on in the Bay? First Friday is a super fun time. Back when it was just an art walk and less of a street party, I made probably about $100 more a night in my hat.
Really?
When it was like a 2-block art, like a gallery walk, Now that it's a 10,000 person street party, the crowd has changed, there's fewer art patrons and more,
partiers,
street party revelers, yeah, exactly. Let's call it the festival crowd, and a lot of those kids are broke, or just don't have tipping etiquette, or just don't feel like they just haven't cultivated that that attitude, which is partially why I like going out there. I've started propagating this gangsters always tip kind of attitude in my show, and guys out there got their girlfriends and they don't look like a chump, right? So it's oh, all right, I liked your act, here you go. As opposed to people who just don't care about you and walk, which happens all the time. It's you can't take it personally.
Cool. Anything else that you've got that about busking or performing in general that you think might help people that are trying to get into that?
Yeah, do it. Do it now. Do it right now. Don't make excuses. I know you're making excuses right now. Stop making them. Shut up. Go to the street, get a hat or a bucket or a bowl, and just put it on the street and then do your thing. Like, I don't care whether you think that you're good looking enough or good enough to do it. You're not going to be the worst artist on the street, because the worst artist on the street is like some crackhead who found a can of gray spray paint and made himself into a statue and is just standing around, you know, or lying on the sidewalk. Or it's like, come on, you know, if you can do anything, like just go and do it. And like they say that a practice is worth, or a performance is worth 10 practices, and it's absolutely true on the street. People walk up and you do a trick and they go woo, or they don't go woo and they walk away. Like they're trying to ignore you. So if it works on the street, it's going to work anywhere else. It's maybe the most valuable venue for practice I have found of any venue for practice.
Real life on the street.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you don't need to wait to do it. You don't need to wait until you do something. Just go do it.
And apparently, unless you're in Berkeley, get up early, go make some money.
Yeah, get up early. Go to your local farmer's market first. Get there really, really, really early. I was getting up at like 5 in the morning to make it to the Ferry Plaza Farmer's Market to get space. That's really competitive. The funny thing is, I get up at, you know, after a year of getting up at, or at least a season of getting up at, you know, 5, 6, 7 in the morning to make Bay Area farmers markets, I get to Folk Life in Seattle, and everybody there rolls in at like 10:30, like rubbing the sleep out of their eyes, you know, getting their coffee, and I've been there for like 2 hours already, you know, just hanging out on the best spot on the whole like park, you know, just like, you know. So, you know, yeah, I mean, it's going to be different no matter where you are, but yeah, definitely, like, if you sleep in, then you're not going to get a space usually. You know, you'll be busking in a park where everybody can stand 200 feet from you, and you're not going to make $1, right?
Location, 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 then.
Absolutely, yeah, location is key. Big enough that people, that you're not going to block the space. Small enough that people can't stand too far away from you and watch. Because what will happen is they'll come up to you and they'll watch, you know, and they'll stand really far away from you. And you'll do some, you know, and like then they'll start like that. They'll see that crowd. You know, it's 1 person and then 2 people and then 4 people and then 6 people, and then you have this like kind of like big smushy like dispersed crowd. And you know, and then once there are enough people, they'll start feeling anonymous a little bit because there's so many other people there. And then you'll do a trick and somebody will go, whoa, or somebody will walk up and be like, what does that thing weigh? You know, or like, oh, how do you do that trick? Or like, you know, whatever. They'll ask you the same kind of questions over and over again, depending on what you're doing. And then, you know, and then once that happens, then you can kind of like, I'll like, oh, all these people are standing here looking at me. Oh, look, it's an audience. Surprise, surprise. You know, and that's how I kind of like, we'll broach that. But that means that they have to be close enough to you that they can come and talk to you once they feel like doing it. If they're across the street, they're not going to walk up to you like from across. You know, sometimes, very rarely, I'll get somebody who watches me from across the street for a really long time, and then like I'll just like not even pay attention to them, and then like they'll walk up all of a sudden and just like put money in the hat. But usually, like 9 times out of 10, those people are just like, oh, there's a show going on. Okay. You know, and the ratio of times they'll do that gets better with the skill of your act. You know, it's like that's the key to every performance problems is just get better. You know, not enough people get you money on the street, get better. Like the naked hooper undercut you on a gig and got it up in front of you, get better. You know, like somebody's crappy brother got the gig instead of you who's better, get better. You know, it's like it's just, and then eventually you just get to a point where like it doesn't matter anymore. You know, you're just good enough that you get what you need, and then sometimes you're not going to get what you need, but like whatever, you get it somewhere else. You know, and that's just the pattern of a freelancer, I guess. That's how it's gone for me.
Cool. So one other thing I wanted to talk to you about was, I know you work with a variety of different props, but most of the time when I see you busking, you're contact juggling. Is there a reason why you do that over other props when you're busking? Or is it personal preference or monetary?
First, I'm best at ball. I mean, that's the funny thing about being an older performer is that now that I cross train a lot and I play with a lot of other props, I can definitely say I'm better at some props that I don't perform now than I was when I started performing with ball. Does that make sense? Like back in the day, you know, when I started performing anything, it was in an open stage and I didn't have anything to lose, and you know, I had this prop that I was, pretty okay at. By the time I was on stage, I was like at least a competent contact juggler, sort of. You know, and then I got a lot shows like that out of the way. And a lot of street shows, like at my farmer's market before I was like, you know, when I was like good, but not great. And, you know, and I got a lot of like crappy tricks out of the way. I got a lot of bad material out of the way. And now I can look back at videos from back then and think, oh, kind of, I wouldn't do that now, you know. But like that's done now, right? But now I have this professional standard where like if I do something good with ball, and then I try and bring out another prop that I'm not as good at, like, it's like, well, you know. But the problem is that ball also is my best draw on the street, right? With all the magical looking impossible tricks in contact juggling, you know, that's like the best way to get people to sort of stop and double take and try and figure out what you're doing for a minute, and then you see it at a crowd, right? Whereas with this other stuff, like, I just don't have anything that's like that powerful to draw a crowd, so I just keep doing ball, you know. And I have a way of integrating multi-ball into my one ball, you know, show, and sometimes I toss juggle a little bit. I bring out juggling balls just to like attract children, you know.
Yeah, more choice better.
Yeah, for sure. And I've definitely performed with like fire staff and that sort of thing for money, but you know, it's more of a rarity at this point in time. Though, you know, people are talking about starting a public fire jam street show, so we might see, maybe I'll be out on the street more often doing staff material.
We have fire contact ball.
Or fire contact ball, but you know, fire contact ball, I don't know if it's yet something that I want to do with any kind of regularity. Not a big fan of flushing and that sort of thing. I'd just rather do cancer later than sooner.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I'll do it once a season, I'll do it maybe once a week, maybe a few 4 or 5 times a week, maybe a little too much. I don't.
Understandably so.
Who knows? Maybe I'm just paranoid.
Cool. Well, yeah, I think that's pretty good. You got any more questions?
I think that's about it.
Cool. Well, we'll post some information for you guys to be able to find Richard and have him come and teach you workshops or perform for you or you know, anything like that. And yeah, thank you so much for doing this, man. It was very awesome.
Good luck.
I'm going for a high five.
2, 3.